We will now proceed to present the details of today's story. Once the evidence had been obtained, it became evident that my second wife was involved in an unidentified incident. This is a feeling that can be described as a lack of certainty about the cause of an event, yet there is a suspicion that something untoward has occurred. It can be hypothesized that this is the result of a subconscious process within the brain that analyzes and interprets information. These stray facts are then accumulated until a pattern is identified, which is then presented to the conscious mind as a potential anomaly. This phenomenon has been extensively discussed by researchers, who have cited hunches and the female intuition as key examples. I had 4 children with my first wife, all of whom were well-adjusted individuals with successful careers and stable families. They have been a significant source of support to me, particularly following the death of their mother. We formed a close bond, akin to that of survivors of a plane crash, and we were all either married or in college. Ellen was approximately 11 years my junior. Despite the age difference, we formed a strong connection. We shared similar values and goals, and she was physically attractive. She was 5 feet 5 inches, 36, and 2,638 pounds. With brown eyes and dark brown, flowing hair, she exercised regularly and enjoyed receiving compliments. My children accepted her and formed a close bond with her. Despite their efforts to maintain a cordial relationship, they never truly bonded. As adults, they were able to coexist without any strong negative feelings towards one another. However, after approximately 6 years of marriage, I began to experience a growing sense of unease. My wife was 46 and I was 55 at the time. I noticed a few minor instances of dishonesty on her part, but nothing significant. Nevertheless, I could not shake off this persistent feeling of unease. Eventually, I decided to seek counsel from an objective third party. In her 30s, she was married to an accountant and had 2 daughters who adored their grandfather. Despite her appearance, she was not an accountant, a fact that kept her busy and contributed to the growth of their financial resources. Nell was the proprietor of one of the most successful private investigation firms in the Southeast. She held 2 degrees, one in a field related to computers and one in psychology. She was adept at interpreting body language and voice inflections. Unconsciously, it made it very difficult to surprise her. She had 5 offices and employed as many technical experts as detectives. One of her strategies was to hire older ex-policemen, both men and women, and young individuals with a geeky appearance who would attract the attention of a geek with a laptop or a grandmother out for a morning stroll. The amount of money I provided her with to start her business was a result of the insurance I received from her mother's passing. She attempted to repay me. She did, however, cease contact when I threatened to never attend another family function with her unless she dropped it. She did not seem shocked when I brought up my concerns. Instead, she offered a series of platitudes, including, "It's probably nothing," and "Maybe it's just your imagination." She did, in fact, investigate the matter for 2 weeks before asking me to stop by her office on my way home. At the time, I had an office downtown near hers. I was the consultant, a role that was not particularly well regarded. The individual whom you had engaged to provide guidance on how to save your company is, in fact, a rather unfortunate example of the type of person I was employed to advise. It was often the case that they already possessed the knowledge required to achieve the desired outcome, yet they were seeking reassurance from someone who was being paid a considerable sum of money for this service. My role involved making difficult decisions, and I was not always comfortable with this aspect of my responsibility. However, in the case of the individuals I was instructed to dismiss, I was aware that their continued employment was untenable. In contrast, there were others who were completely taken by surprise. She threw the folder on the desk when I walked in. Our neighbor, 34, a year-long period of time elapsed. The individual in question was a married father of 2. He was unemployed and spent his time while his wife was at work and their children were at school. He sought to relieve his tensions with my wife in a variety of positions in a variety of locations. There were photographs of him and her on my couch, in the washing machine, in the dining room, in the backyard, and even one of them kneeling in front of the children's swing while my wife sat on the swing rocking on her back. The couple were observed kneeling in front of the children's swing while my wife sat on the swing rocking on her back. It is unclear why they were not using a bed. Nell watched me closely, demonstrating an understanding of my situation. She advised me not to take any rash actions, suggesting that I simply end the relationship and move on with my life. She believes that my wife cannot accept the loss of our marriage and that the prenuptial agreement protects me from her potential claims. I am aware of my own devious nature. If you consider taking such an action, I advise against it. It was too late to do anything, but I thanked her for her advice. She looked at my eyes and picked up the phone. I am calling Junior as he needs to be informed. After all, he is your lawyer. Perhaps he will dissuade you from pursuing the course of action you have planned. This led me to the den of my oldest son. Mel sent me some of the photos. I have already initiated the requisite paperwork. It is imperative that you remain calm and allow me to assume responsibility for this matter. I have done so. When might this be executed? This is Tuesday. I shall file the paperwork tomorrow and enlist the aid of a few favors. I shall have her served on Friday, at your convenience, wherever you desire. Are you returning home? I shall endeavor to be agreeable for 2 days. She does not heed my counsel. In recent times, she has been entirely unaware of anything untoward. As I rose to take my leave, he placed a hand on my arm and implored me not to act rashly. I assured him that I had no intention of doing something foolish. I subsequently discovered that I had not yet reached my vehicle when he contacted his acquaintance. One of the most. I am currently seeking a successful defense lawyer in this state. Please maintain a flexible schedule, as I may require your services shortly. I was correct in my assumption that she did not notice anything out of the ordinary. I was taking a few days off between assignments, so I decided to visit my youngest son. He was in the back, but upon hearing the bell, he came out grinning. "Dad, what's up?" he asked. "I already know," I replied. "I received a call from Junior and Mel last night. I assumed you would arrive shortly. What can I prepare for you?" He was my rebellious child, adorned with tattoos and piercings. He had never been in trouble throughout his life. He had inherited his mother's irreverent sense of humor and my sense of right and wrong. He could have pursued any academic discipline at university, but he chose to study. He developed a lifelong fascination with weapons, which he subsequently built into a highly lucrative business. I provided him with the same support I had given my other children, providing him with startup capital. He was a highly skilled gunsmith with a devoted following. He spent his career specializing in the customization and enhancement of weapons for SWAT teams. He guaranteed the accuracy of their sniper rifles at 350 yards. One could cover the first 3 shots with a quarter and the next 3 with a 50C piece if one could hold it steady. It was possible to hit it. He did all the work for the 3 largest cities around, as well as most of the Federal Bureau of Investigation work. He also had a very profitable gun shop and a police equipment supply line. I had plenty of weapons. He and his family frequently engaged in shooting activities together on a 20-acre property I owned in a remote area of the county, which we had converted into a gun range. He registered all his weapons there. He was married, which I had not anticipated. She owned her own tattoo shop and was highly skilled, with her work regularly featured in magazines. It was love at first sight. From the outset, I found her quite appealing. I acquired a few new items that he demonstrated. On my return journey, I received a telephone call from my youngest daughter, a nurse practitioner and a partner in her practice. She inquired as to my well-being and whether I required assistance. I smiled, but I could see her frowning. Over the telephone, her reading glasses were positioned on her nose. "Do not worry, my dear. I am not going to fail to witness the birth of my newest grandchild." Over the years, I found myself under a considerable amount of stress, particularly when working with a business that I felt would not survive. In such instances, I would often turn to my doctor for assistance. She would prescribe a week's worth of medication, sometimes providing samples after issuing a warning. On Thursday night, she promised to call in a prescription to the pharmacy. I had dinner with my wife that evening. We engaged in a pleasant conversation. If I had not already been aware of her actions, it would have been difficult to believe what she was doing. I opened a bottle of wine, one from a local vineyard I knew she loved. I had picked it up that day. I poured her a glass as we relaxed after our meal. I did not care for wine, a fact she was well aware of, so she was not surprised when I opened a beer. Upon the emptying of her glass, I proceeded to pour her another and obtain a second beer. Approximately halfway through the second glass, she exhibited signs of drowsiness. I then suggested that she lie back on the couch and relax. I proceeded to play music and clean up the kitchen. She mumbled something that sounded like, "Thank you," and began to fall asleep. I then cleaned the kitchen and made 2. The first phone call was the extent of the first. The second took a little longer. "Sandy, how are you? Did Bar get a job yet? I may have something for him. I am meeting this guy at his factory to observe his second shift capabilities. Would it be an option for him to come over and ride with me? He needs a night operations manager, and the pay is in the mid. I estimated his remuneration to be within the range of $40 an hour. I suggested he might be interested in the position and he seemed enthusiastic. I informed him that he could commence his duties in approximately 30 minutes. I made a note to dispose of the burner phone as soon as I could and went outside to wait. I had a mid-90s GMC truck that I hardly ever drove. It came with a slimline bed cover that I removed immediately. I considered a truck to be of little use if it could not be used to transport items. I put the cover back on a few minutes later. Barry arrived and thanked me for my assistance. We proceeded to discuss the merits of my wife and my relationship. This was not an issue. Barry, could you kindly verify that the bolts are properly secured on this apparatus? My vehicle is currently undergoing repairs, and my wife is displeased with my use of her vehicle. I would be similarly displeased if this apparatus were to become dislodged while in motion. I had the cover lid in an elevated position. The tailgate was lowered. He leaned over to examine the bolts when I discharged the stun gun. He exhibited a quivering motion, a sighing sound, and then ceased to be. I forced him the remainder of the way in, closed the tailgate and lid, and departed. I drove for approximately 5 minutes before pulling off at a secluded location. He was just coming around when I administered another jolt, seizing the opportunity to don the handcuffs and leg shackles. I proceeded to our gun range, which was approximately 30 minutes away. The route entailed traversing a dirt road that was in a state of disrepair, resembling a pathway that had been deliberately neglected. I likely exceeded the speed limit and encountered several undulations with considerable force, a consequence of my heightened emotional state. I proceeded to unlock the gate and drive through it, and as I did so, I could hear him yelling and thumping around. I made a mental note to remember the gag on my return journey. I then continued on my way to the range. I had not previously realized how rough the road was, but then again I had never driven it at such a fast pace. He began yelling as soon as I opened the tailgate and extracted him by grasping his leg restraints and pulling him out. He emitted a thumping sound upon impact with the ground. He opened his mouth to voice his displeasure, and I promptly inserted the barrel of my judge into his mouth. For those unacquainted with the term, a judge is a revolver capable of firing 45 or 45s or 410 shotgun shells. He became silent, and I proceeded to deliver my next instructions. I am going to release you from your current position. You will then proceed to walk over to the bench and assume a seated position. It is imperative that you remain stationary and silent unless instructed otherwise. He nodded his head in response, although it was difficult to ascertain whether he was doing so with his mouth fully open. I am unsure if I damaged a tooth when I removed it, but he did not appear to be in any discomfort. He complained that he was unable to maintain his balance, and I lost patience. Therefore, I instructed him to crawl over with occasional verbal encouragement, including the information that the firearm in question was a revolver. It was loaded with 410 shotgun shells, comprising number 4 shot. The firearm in question is of a similar size to the ABB, but slightly larger. It is capable of inflicting severe injury upon the human body, but only if the trigger is pulled with precise force. If discharged into the body, the injury will be fatal. Even if the trigger is not pulled with sufficient force, the injury will be significant. Barry nodded, tears streaming down his face. I then proceeded to secure him to the bench with 36 pieces of the aforementioned equipment. Once restrained with zip ties, the subject attempted to vocalize, but a ball gag was placed in his mouth and secured. This item was obtained from the subject's daughter-in-law, who operated a business selling sexual toys in addition to her tattoo work. The gag led to a number of intriguing discussions at the dinner table, involving the subject's daughters and their respective partners. A small group of friends would convene approximately every 3 to 4 months to review the latest merchandise. This often resulted in positive outcomes for the husbands in question. I proceeded to sit in a camp chair in front of him. I could discern the tracks of his tears in the light of the full moon. Barry, I understand your reluctance, but I believe we need to address this issue. Why did you resort to such an extreme measure? I am confident that you possess the capacity to make better decisions. What could possibly motivate a seemingly reasonable individual like you to engage in such an act of violence? It is evident that trauma is a significant contributing factor. What kind of trauma could possibly result in such an extreme reaction? The death of a child, the loss of a job, or the abandonment of loved ones are all potential triggers. Infidelity is another common cause. Many men have been driven to extreme actions as a result of their wives' infidelity. Revenge, pain, and sadness are the inevitable consequences, affecting not only the perpetrators but also their families. Divorce, loss of children, and other forms of collateral damage are also common outcomes. The situation can become increasingly complex and destructive. Barry, do you have any comments on this? I paused and laughed. Oops, silly me. Here, let me help. I removed the gag, which resulted in a small amount of scalp being removed along with it. This allows us to converse in a more civilized manner. It is now your turn, Barry. I have dominated the conversation for long enough, would you not agree? Speak, Shah. I was so angry that I screamed at him. He was sobbing. I am truly sorry, but she made advances towards me. The slap echoed throughout the night. Did it matter who made advances towards whom? Did her actions make her any less married? Did you either of you do the right thing? And I walked away, but I did not think that what I was about to put you through was worth the risk of harming an elderly person. He was crying and almost incoherent. This is what led you to act as you did, Barry. It is a fully functioning flashlight with a stun gun built in. You simply shove it hard against someone and the prongs come out and deliver a powerful electric shock. That is what I have been told, at least. My youngest son gave it to me. I stood up and walked around him, checking his bonds. I stopped in front of him and I then proceeded to retrieve a bag from the rear of the vehicle, which contained various toys for our amusement. I then directed Barry's attention to the items, which he appeared to find intriguing. I then produced a pair of heavy-duty shears and began to cut his trousers. He became visibly distressed when I initiated the cutting process, and he attempted to resist my actions. I then reminded him that remaining still was necessary to prevent accidents. I then discarded the trousers and observed Barry. It was evident that he was experiencing significant distress, which was surprising given the relatively minor nature of the situation. I had not previously anticipated that this seemingly inconsequential issue would cause him such distress. My eldest daughter is the proprietor of a private investigation company of considerable repute. I was informed that I was holding up a sheath of papers. I shook my head in disbelief. Barry, I said. Mrs. Oliver is at least 60 years of age, and Mrs. Grant is a mere 25. You weigh at least 250 pounds. You don't cull much, do you? I continued. And Mrs. Jeff, I was under the impression that you held a deep prejudice against black people. It is, therefore, surprising to see that you have overcome your prejudices. I would estimate that her husband is approximately 65 years of age. I would also estimate that he weighs close to 300 pounds. Surprisingly, I concluded, I thought prison guards would be a bit more. You have certainly been a busy man in the neighborhood. Do you have anything left over for your wife? She is the woman who gave you 2 children and who works all the overtime she can get to support you. I imagine it would be distressing for her to see these pictures. You seem to struggle and moan. I patted your head in a fatherly fashion. Do not worry, Barry. I will be sure to offer her a shoulder to lean on. I will provide assistance to her and the children in any way I can. In the event of losing the house, I may allow her and the children to reside with me. You are aware that Miss Oliver's son holds the position of vice president in charge of mortgages at your bank. Are you not? You and he did not get along in school, if I am correct. I will offer her consolation in the best way I can. She may be grateful for my assistance. There may be snow on my roof, but there is still fire in my stove. Fortunately, I am fond of children, so this would be beneficial for us. I posit that we may emerge from this situation as the winners. I am even contemplating the possibility of adopting the children. Would you have any objection to that? He was slumped over, so I patted his cheeks a couple of times, then slapped him good and hard. I was afraid you were taking a nap. We cannot afford to be lax. We have a great deal to do. I am going to give you some choices. Barry, I want you to think hard. Regarding the aforementioned items, I will allow a brief interval for deliberation upon completion of my remarks. However, Barry, I anticipate a definitive decision prior to our departure. I then proceeded to extract an object from the bag that bore resemblance to pliers but had 3 prongs at the front. Can you ascertain the nature of this item? It is, in fact, a bull bander, a device utilized for the purpose of castration. The device is a rubber band, approximately ½ an inch wide and 1 inch in circumference. It is placed over the 3 prongs and the handle is squeezed, causing the prongs to spread the band by approximately 4 inches. The subsequent step is to grasp the bull calf by the scrotum and, once the handle is released, the band constricts the scrotum. This is intended to cause significant pain initially, which should subside after approximately an hour. The calf will then become numb within 3 days. The testicles will no longer function within a week and a half to 2 weeks. The scrotum will drop off quickly and almost painlessly. The procedure is invasive yet highly effective. I should note that my youngest daughter's husband owns a beef operation with his father. He appeared to experience a profound sense of fear. I then presented him with a bottle of pills, which I had obtained from my daughter. These are specifically designed for use in animals, particularly in cases of oversexed male dogs in pounds. One of these pills can effectively suppress sexual desire in a dog. The effects of the procedure are reversible, with the exception of the effects of a third or simultaneous procedure, which are irreversible. The effects of a second procedure, performed at the same time as the first, last approximately 1 month. The effects of a third procedure, performed at the same time as the first two, last approximately 2 weeks. The effects of a fourth procedure, performed at the same time as the first 3, are not reversible. The effects of a fifth procedure, performed at the same time as the first 4, are not reversible. The effects of a sixth procedure, performed at the same time as the first 5, are not reversible. The effects of a seventh procedure, performed at the same time as the first 6, are not reversible. The effects of an eighth procedure, performed at the same time as the first 7, are not reversible. The effects of a ninth procedure, performed at the same time as the first 8, are. The tattoo gun was provided by my in-laws. I simply need to hold the drawings to your skin and follow the lines. Would you prefer blue or black ink? I had the truck headlights on so that he could clearly see the drawings. I held up one which was a detailed drawing of the male genitalia. This is my favorite. It is situated on the cheek, with the glands positioned on the edge of the lips. I have also created another design, which reads, "I love Dick," to be placed across the forehead. This may enhance one's popularity with the opposite sex. I then invited Barry to select one of the designs, but he declined. Consequently, I intend to tattoo all of them on him. I have forgotten one design, which I will present shortly. Further documentation. My eldest son is a lawyer, and I am aware that alienation of affection suits are legally permitted in this state. I have prepared 3 documents. One for myself, one for Mr. Jeff, and one for Mr. Grant. Mrs. Oliver is a widow, but she has been named as a witness. You are free to select this document if you wish, but I would prefer you to be fully cognizant of the situation. I will be back shortly, and I expect you to have made a decision by then. I proceeded to venture into the darkness, locating a log from which to observe the nocturnal scene. An owl emitted a distinctive hoot, and the howls of coyotes echoed on the ridge. Tree frogs provided a chorus in the wetland, their song a testament to the night's tranquility. When I returned, I found him slumped over, as if in distress. He had apparently vocalized a cry for assistance. "What is it to be, Barry? I have a couple of favorites myself, and I hope you will decline to select one, thus allowing me to retain possession of them," he requested with a sense of urgency and desperation. I yawned, indicating that I was no longer interested in engaging in this activity. I held up the ball bander, informing him that the procedure would be brief. I inquired as to whether he would want to observe. It might be beneficial for him to do so. I removed a leather mask from the bag and secured it to his head, leaving only his nose exposed. I replaced the castrating band with a regular heavy-duty rubber band. I heard him scream when it snapped into place. While it would be uncomfortable, it would not cause any long-term damage. If the device was removed within 24 hours, there would be long-term damage. I retrieved the bottle of pills, which were estrogen pills that had been left over from a hormone replacement treatment that my soon-to-be ex-wife had undergone. The wife was insistent on achieving a more youthful appearance. The potential consequences of the procedure were minimal: temporary soreness of the nipples and an elevated mood. A bottle of water was procured, and 5 pills were placed in the hand. The front of the mask was unzipped, and the nose was held shut. The subject opened his mouth to scream, and the pills were forcibly inserted. Subsequently, I forcibly inserted the water bottle into his throat, causing him to gag and spit. However, he eventually swallowed the water. As I continued humming to myself, I heard a voice emanating from the darkness. "That's sufficient, Father. I believe you have made your point. We will address the matter from here on out." At this point, my 4 children and 1 son emerged from the darkness. My father-in-law and one of my daughters-in-law. "How did you ascertain this information?" I inquired, somewhat taken aback. Mel responded with a mirthful chuckle. "You are so predictable. I had 2 individuals who were aware of your actions since the beginning. I attempted to intervene sooner, but my opinion was overruled. They wished to allow you a brief period of enjoyment. You are a formidable individual. Go home. You have other matters to attend to. We have resolved this issue. I acknowledged their decision with a bow and departed. I had contacted Sandy shortly after I had incapacitated Barry. I informed her that I was compelled to depart, as I had an appointment but was delayed and subsequently cancelled it. I was uncertain of his whereabouts, but he returned 4 hours later, having been transported by the police. He asserted that he had been compelled into a vehicle, mugged, beaten, and left on the side of the road. The police were convinced that it was a disgruntled husband or group of husbands. I had a half my wife's alibi was readily accepted by the police. She claimed to have passed out and thus could not confirm the exact time of my return. I will never forget her scream the following morning when she went to take a shower. She had been shaved of her pubic hair and an intricate tattoo was in place, proudly displaying the name Barry across it. The hairless mound was not a genuine tattoo, but rather an ink tattoo created by tattoo artists who were experimenting with new techniques. It was designed to last for approximately 3 months and was typically used by individuals who were undecided about getting a real tattoo. If they changed their mind, the ink would gradually fade, causing no permanent harm. The law was above suspicion. My daughter-in-law and the rest of the family were seen by many witnesses dining out at a local restaurant. It was hypothesized that the tattoo may have been done by a fellow artist who was moving out of town and could use a little extra money. This was, however, merely a wild supposition. I was on my way out the door for a short vacation when my daughter-in-law screamed after leaving the photos and a no-fault divorce decree on the dining room table with a note saying to sign, and I would help her get set up in an apartment. She was provided with accommodation and financial assistance for a period of 3 months, regardless of whether she secured employment. Following a highly publicized divorce, she resided in a different neighborhood for a while and subsequently married a man 4 years her junior. It would appear that the older man concept did not prove to be a successful one for her, as they relocated directly after the ceremony to Alaska. I was amused when I heard that she dislikes cold weather intensely. I never inquired as to why she decided to cheat. In fact, I subsequently spoke to her again. The lawyers were responsible for handling the subsequent proceedings, and photographs were delivered to various mailboxes in the neighborhood. Sandy subsequently evicted Barry from the property, and he subsequently departed for an unknown destination. Once the situation had been resolved, I instructed Mel to locate him so that the divorce papers could be served and child support established. I was informed that it was challenging for him to pay the required level of child support and maintain a satisfactory standard of living, but that as long as he was fulfilling his obligations, nobody was concerned about the specifics of his financial situation. I unofficially adopted the role of a child's guardian. Sandy was another child to Sandy, providing her with a shoulder to cry on. I spoke with Mr. Oliver and negotiated a new mortgage agreement for her. He was very sympathetic, so much so that 11 months later I kept the boys with me while they honeymooned. His wedding gift to her was the paid note on her house. The boys got a little sister 2 years later. Mr. Jeffrey divorced his wife, as did Mr. Grant. Mrs. Jeff moved across town and spent the next 3 years trying to reconcile. He finally started talking to subsequently. She relocated to the neighborhood, yet they have yet to remarry. Mrs. Grant, being from out of state, had nowhere to go. I observed her walking down the road with a single suitcase, visibly distressed. I felt responsible, so I took her home and placed her in a spare bedroom. She proceeded to assume control of my household, maintaining it in an immaculate state. It transpired that she possessed an aptitude for business, and thus she now oversees the domestic office in addition to my own. I purchased a gym membership, and while I enhanced my physical condition, she lost over 100 pounds. She was the object of considerable attention from attractive men, who were keen to form a relationship with her. However, she made it clear that she was not interested in pursuing another partnership. After she lost the first $50, she surprised me by waking me in the middle of the night by bouncing on my bed. I was initially confused by her behavior, but she explained that she was trying to convey a message. When I asked her what the message was, she said, "Tasses." I was perplexed by this response, but she clarified that it meant, "I love you." Took me a moment to realize that she was naked. I had been wanting to conduct a weight test for some time, but I was concerned that the bed would not support both of us. I now request that you all move over. I have always slept on the right side of the bed. My children found it amusing when my partner informed them at Thanksgiving that we were going to start a family. I attempted to dissuade her from this decision, but she asserted that I was approximately 6 weeks too late. I ultimately decided to proceed with the marriage. My 4 children subsequently engaged in a lengthy discussion with my partner regarding my views on fidelity. It appears that this conversation may have caused her some concern. It later came to my attention that her husband was engaging in infidelity, and she was seeking a relationship with Barry as a form of retribution. As a result of my actions, he had evidence and she did not. Our daughter was born approximately 3 days before my 5th grandchild. I was 10 days shy of my 58th birthday when I discovered the truth. She will be 22 when she graduates from college, which means I will be 80 by then. Recently, the children held a Halloween party and insisted we attend. It was a horror-themed event. I wore a fake hatchet and a hockey mask. My wife dressed as Elver, and she had the body for it. The only frightening aspect of the event was how attractive she was. My daughter, the in-law, who was a tattoo artist, was attired in a 3-piece suit and carried a briefcase. The other children were curious about who she was. My father-in-law, who is the scariest man I have ever encountered, won first prize for the costume. This concludes the narrative. If you found this account engaging, please indicate your appreciation by clicking the thumbs up icon and remember to subscribe for more content like this. I have experimented with a new style, so if you enjoyed it, kindly let me know in the comments. Your support and feedback are invaluable to me. Thank you for watching.